Julie, and I am the Director of College Planning, Education, and Training at MEFA. And with me today, I have my colleague, Mary Rubenis, who is the Director of Outreach for our Attainable program, and she will tell you a little bit about that. And we also have some wonderful presenters that I'm thrilled to introduce you to. We have Jenna Shales, who is the Associate Director of Student Accessibility Services at Bridgewater State University. Caitlin Koretka, who's the Access Advisor for Disability Services at Westfield State University. And Sarah Lazar, Director of the Banacos Academic Center at Westfield State University. And so the webinar this afternoon will hopefully be helpful to all of you who work with students as you're supporting your students with disabilities in their transition to college. And I know that this expert group has a lot to share, so we'll kind of start there, and then I have some questions for them, and we'll open it up for questions for you, and I'll tell you how you can do that. I think it's best if you use the Q&A section. That way I can keep really good track of your questions and make sure we get those answered. You can also request live transcript. You can hit the CC button if you would like that, and that will show you the words that we're speaking on the screen. And also just know that we're recording this, so tomorrow we will send you the recording and you'll have that to review at a later time. That helps you from taking notes or whatever. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Rubenis from MEFA to just tell you a little bit about the Attainable program, so you'll be aware of that as well, and then we'll move right into the other presenters.
Great, thank you, Julie. I think the two words that sum up my work at MEFA are around disability and education, and so that's really the bridge to this webinar today. So I wanted to share just a few key points about the Attainable program. My role, like Julie mentioned, is outreach and education around the Attainable Savings Plan, which is an ABLE account, or a 529A, and it's a savings account for an individual with a disability to use it for qualified disability expenses, which includes things like education, transportation, healthcare, employment training, housing. You can use it for housing as well. In order to be eligible for one of these tax-advantaged accounts, the disability has to have occurred prior to the age of 26. So I wanted to mention that. And you need to meet one of Social Security's list of diagnoses in their Blue Book in order to be eligible for one of these ABLE accounts. And so I will put a link in the chat to the Attainable landing page from mefa.org. And if you want to learn more, feel free to go there. I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I think, Jenna, I want to make sure you have permission. Are you able to share your screen?
I believe so. Let's give it a whirl. All right. Are folks able to see my screen at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Let me put it into a presenter view. If I can get it to move out of the way. It's always the tricky part. One moment. All right, well, we're gonna do it like this. Surprise. Okay, so my name is Jenna Shales. I am with Student Accessibility Services at Bridgewater State University. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my contact information should be displayed on your screen. You can email the team at sas@bridgew.edu or me directly at jshales@bridgew.edu. It's important for you to know that Student Accessibility Services is kind of undergoing a big shift in our philosophical approach to how we work with students. So our updated mission, vision, and values are available on the screen at this moment. Our mission is really focused on empowering students, right? We want them to have a meaningful university experience and to build self-advocacy skills and other skills that will help them throughout their future. Our big vision is to really be out of business. That would be great. If we could create a fully accessible community and experience for our students, you wouldn't need us anymore, and that would be wonderful. So that's really our vision. And our, values are empowering advocates, promoting equality, and enriching community. We currently directly support over 1,000 students at Bridgewater State University. That's about 10% of our entire student population, though we do know that almost a quarter of our student population identified as having a disability in a recent 2018 campus climate survey. The types of diagnoses of the students that we support are listed on the screen at this moment. So really, if a student has pretty much any diagnosis that is significantly impacting their college experience, or what we say substantially limiting them in one or more major life areas, which does include learning, then they may be eligible for accommodations or other services through our office. This is a graphic that I really enjoy. The 3 frames sort of show the role of our office in the direction of where we want to head with students, right? So we know that equality as an approach isn't necessarily equitable, right? So in the first graphic on the left, you can see 3 individuals all tasked with writing on a chalkboard. The person in the middle, who is relatively tall, is able to access that chalkboard just fine, it seems, and they can write on the chalkboard. The person on the left is a bit shorter and they can write on the chalkboard, but it's probably a bit of a struggle and they can only access a small portion of the chalkboard. And the person on the right, who is sitting in a walker, can't reach the chalkboard at all. So through accommodation, right, which is what Student Accessibility Services provides to students that are eligible, we are able to help them all achieve the task of writing on the chalkboard. So the person that's a bit shorter gets a box to stand on, the person who's sitting on the walker gets a ramp and a platform, and now they can all reach the chalkboard and they can all participate equitably. However, if we could be proactive and not retrofit, we would just get a bigger chalkboard and put it a bit lower on the wall. That way everybody can reach it, right? So that's the model that we're shifting towards, and we look forward to working with students as we continue down that path. The really big thing to note is that higher education, when it comes to students with disabilities, is a really truly student-led experience. So this is a huge shift from the high school environment for a lot of students. In the higher education environment, the student has to self-identify and they have to be the one who requests accommodations directly from the office. Students have to submit their own documentation. Students have to actively participate in the interactive process that occurs where the staff in Student Accessibility Services chats with the student and figures out, how exactly they're being impacted by their diagnosis and how that may come into play in their classes or other aspects of the university experience. Additionally, students are tasked with distributing their letters of accommodation directly to their faculty and reaching out if they need any assistance. So again, folks that are working with students in the high school environment, you can see how that is a big shift, like I said before, from the K through 12 model, where the school system and parents and other advocates tend to lead those processes. Now you'll be seeing a screen that has a glimpse of the timeline for accommodations specifically at BSU. So I am noting that because every school varies a little bit, in their timeline process. For us, if you are a student that is going to be arriving traditionally scheduled in fall, you would be hearing back about your admissions decision, anytime basically up through April, ideally. You could attend admitted students events in April and throughout the rest of that spring, to get to know us and the other resources that are on campus. May 1st, that's your time to enroll. So make the final decision, sign your name on the line, right? Once you're enrolled, submit your documentation to Student Accessibility Services. And I have a screen coming up of what those documentation requirements will be. Throughout that summer, you're going to register for classes. And once you're registered for classes, you would actually meet directly with a member of our team. And that's that interactive process that I mentioned before, where we're talking with you about your experience and coming up with accommodations and any other resources that you might need. So then end of August, we offer our pre-college workshop, which we now refer to as our early access extravaganza. And then classes start. Here we go. This is a more detailed look at that process, but really it just reiterates the same thing, that submitting documentation is really kind of the first step to requesting services. We have a view now of our documentation requirements. So again, documentation requirements can vary between the different institutions, but for the most part, you're going to see some consistencies. For example, we require that a student has a specific diagnosis documented, right? And that it was assessed by a qualified professional. It needs to be current. We generally define that as being within 3 years, but case by case, we can certainly work with people in case there's a reason to extend that for a student. And the documentation has to be professional. There are some additional documentation requirements related to specific diagnoses because they're so variable or they're so comprehensive that we really want to make sure we have an accurate sense of the diagnosis. We do get more information though from that interactive process where we chat with the student and really get a feel for how it's impacting them individually. Once we have that all done, like I said before, we will work with students to set up academic or community accommodations. We do referrals to campus resources. We host different programs and events and trainings and in-services throughout the year. So we have a small list here. One of our most popular programs is our peer mentoring program, where we have upper class students pair up with, generally we try to do first-time freshman students, but we have opened that up to returning students that have really not been at BSU before because of COVID. So that's really successful. They meet with that upper class student once a week in general and just kind of make sure that they have a smooth transition to the university. We offer lots of assistive technology. We have an adaptive lab, which we use to proctor tests that require specific assistive technology or other resources. At BSU, we have a decent sized population that requires deaf or hard of hearing services. So that's an area that we have definitely grown in. Housing, meal plan, and parking exceptions. We work with our athletics department for NCAA accommodations. And we do referrals to lots of other resources on campus. So I've listed 3 on here that are probably our most popular, I'll say. So within the Academic Achievement Center, which Student Accessibility Services is a part of, we have academic coaching, which helps students with executive function skills, planning and organizing their workload, time management. We also have a variety of tutoring or learning assistance services there. We do lots of referrals to the Wellness Center, which is both counseling and medical wellness. And then we also collaborate very closely with the Pride Center because we have a lot of overlap in the students that we support. If those services don't seem like they're quite comprehensive enough for the students that you are currently working with that want to transition to college, we do have another program that I want to mention briefly. It is called the BSU Excel Program. So Extraordinary Expectations, Career Education Life. Some of you may already be familiar with this program. One of the versions of it is part of the Macy Grant. It used to be called the ICE program here at BSU. And it has 3 different sections that all work towards ensuring students with intellectual or developmental disabilities have a fully inclusive college experience. So the 3 different kind of subsections of this program are Excel Partnership, Excel Certificate, and Excel Transition. The 2 that I want to highlight briefly are the Certificate and Transition programs. So Certificate is for a student that has finished high school but did not obtain their diploma. It is a fully inclusive 2-year program where at the end of it, if they successfully complete the program, they receive a certificate of completion. So not a degree, but a certificate of completion. And it really gets them some solid experience in the community, with classes, with skill building, and really helps promote success when it comes to future employment endeavors. The transition program is similar. It's designed for students that have completed high school, but have earned their high school diploma. It is a fully inclusive post-secondary program. Some students audit classes, some students attend them for credit. The goal is to get them all attending for credit over time. And ideally at the end of it, they'll earn a degree. So that's another resource that offers some additional support, which includes education coaches, job coaches, different style of peer mentor, the Excel staff check-ins, and residence life support. So that's outside the traditional scope of accommodations that are offered through our office. And that is pretty much the gist of Bridgewater State University. But I look forward to answering any questions you have in the future.
Thank you so much, Jenna. And I think Sarah, now you might have some slides to share.
Yes, I do. And I must say that I'm not so swift when it comes to unmuting myself. So, hello, everyone. We are excited to be here. I'm here with Caitlin Koretka, who again is our Access Advisor, and we're both going to talk about the Bonacos Academic Center. Excuse me, and let me just put this into the slide format. If it will let me, it will not. There we go. All right, Bonacos Academic Center. We are located on Westfield State University campus. We're part of the campus. We're one of the services. I'm going to briefly talk to high school personnel, an overview of the center, preparing students for college and admissions process. We'll talk about that. I think lots of those questions will be answered in the question and answer session, but we'll also address some admission issues, and if there are current challenges in the high school, then that is something that I think that we have in the question and answer center session as well. The Bonacos Academic Center actually houses 4 programs. It all started with the Learning Disabilities program in 1979, and the Tutoring program, Academic Strategies and Disability Services, blossomed from the Learning Disabilities program. They're 4 separate programs. Our Tutoring and Academic Strategies, they're free supports on campus. They're available to all students on campus, whether or not they're registered with a disability support program, which is so important for students to know. Students come to the Bonacos Academic Center freely, willingly. They want support, they come through our doors, and we try to help them out, whomever they are. Our peer tutoring program is free. It is peers. So although we work our darndest to find a tutor for all courses, we cannot guarantee that a student will get a tutor in a course. But we also have the academic strategy support, which helps round out how students are thinking about their studying. And often it turns out that they need to think of a different way in order to study. It's not studying for 1 hour before a test. It's studying 2 to 3 hours for every credit hour a student is in class. So it's very important for students to start preparing for that type of work now, in high school especially, that they understand the expectations of a college student, how much they have to work, how deeply they have to think about it, how much they have to prove that they know that information. And our academic strategy support, working with tutors, can really help bolster that skill and that practice. So we have for academic strategies, workshops in reading, exam preparation, note taking, time management, in test taking. And my favorite one is actually create your own study guide, because it really empowers the student to do the work and not wait around for someone to give them a study guide or a list of terms that they need to know for a test. It really is the student's responsibility at the college level to do that. Anybody, it is not an accommodation as well. So that's important. Our tutors at Westfield State are mostly upper level students. They're recommended by professors. They are trained to be a tutor. And again, it's a free service, both the tutoring and the academic strategies. Caitlin, will you talk about disability services, please?
Of course. So Disability Services is here in the Bonacco Center for any student with any sort of disability. We sort of follow a similar process to what Jenna was sharing before. We work with the students to get the documentation that they need, to talk about maybe accommodations that might be beneficial for them, walk them through what their diagnosis is, and they share with us how it affects them, either academically or, you know, in a living situation. And so we also connect them with other resources on campus if needed, whether that would be the TRIO program, the Reading and Writing Center, the library, all of those resources that are available to all students on campus. We make sure that any student registered with Disability Services is aware of them and knows how to access them. We also help students notify their professors of their accommodations. So we send out accommodation notifications at the start of every semester. And we encourage students to connect with their professors about those. We also have an exam room up in the center where students with appropriate accommodations can come and take their exam with us in a more reduced distraction environment. So we walk them through that process as well. So our email is right here on the slide, ds@westfield.ma.edu. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. But really we're a program, you know, for all students. We're very supportive. We really want these students to succeed, and we want to make sure they're aware of everything on campus that they can utilize to do so.
Thank you, Caitlin. Some other good information about Westfield State is that we have about 881 students who have identified themselves to us who have said they have a disability. And that is, I just calculated out, it's 25% of the population. So this does not include the people who keep coming into Caitlin's office. Every day she gets at least 3 more people. I mean, every week she gets at least three more people. But students keep self-identifying and telling us that they have a disability. So it's normal. And that is something that is so important for students to understand now. It is so much more normal now to have a disability than it was in the past. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Learning Disabilities Program. This is an academic support program for incoming first-year, first-time students who have a diagnosis of a learning disorder or ADHD. Okay, the Learning Disabilities Program, what makes us unique is that we have one point person to follow a student from orientation to graduation. We meet with the students once or twice a week to help with studying, organizing, finding resources. We meet with first and second year students each semester to help with early course registration, which is what they get because they're part of the Learning Disabilities Program. And we work with them individually to determine which accommodations are reasonable and appropriate. We're reaching out to them regularly. We monitor their academic progress. It's really one of the most important things for a student, any student to have when they're in college, to have one point person that they can go to and ask any question, who will be that person to direct them to the proper resource, or might be that resource themselves, to make sure that they get their answers, that they're addressing their issues and their concerns, that they know how to work with a professor. They know how to write an email to a professor. Very simple things to help acculturate students to the campus culture. The Learning Disabilities Program is an admissions-based program. The due date or the priority deadline is February 1st for admissions. And we are doing the early action. So we are accepting applications now for the Learning Disabilities Program. And I think Yes, you can come visit. We're doing a lot of Zooms lately, so please feel free to contact me or Caitlin or Jenna. Jenna often jumps on Zooms with me, and we can talk with your school, with parents, whomever. Okay, but we are happy to meet people and make sure that people are prepared for college. Thank you.
Thank you. So I actually have a quick question for both of you. I probably shouldn't put you on the spot. Are you okay with sharing these slides with us? And then, great.
Yes.
So when there was a question about that. So I'll just let everyone know when we send you the recording tomorrow, we can send you these slides as well. So you'll be able to look back on all this great information. So we'll just start opening it up for questions, but I have a couple to start with anyway. And so I guess when I hear you talk, all three of you, I just think, wow, that sounds terrific. There are so many resources there, and such, support and kind and caring people who are, all in on helping students, get to and through college. So for counselors who are working with families and students, how do you talk with them about how do they support their families in finding out about these types of programs, these types of services on multiple, multiple different campuses? How do you go about that, Sarah?
We either have people come to us or we're working with admissions in our open house and other sessions they might have. We get invited by schools or CPACs to come, or MEFA, to come and talk. I think that our primary our purpose is not necessarily recruiting, but making sure that prospective students know what to expect. And I know that Jenna and I and Caitlin have a drive to ensure, to the best of our ability, that high school students know what to expect in college and that they're prepared for it. So best way is, I would think, go look at the websites of the schools you're interested in, or go look up the schools that have the degree that you're interested in, and then check their disability services or accessibility services support.
And Jenna, I'll ask you a question. You've worked with a lot of students, clearly. So what do you think is most needed for a high school student to transition well to college?
So I would say the number one thing would be self-advocacy skills. Understanding who they are, what their diagnosis is, what that means for them, what they need, how to ask for what they need. That's gigantic, especially because in colleges and universities, it's led by the student. All of that is led by the student. So self-advocacy, I would say, is the biggest. And then kind of like runners up would be maybe an accurate understanding of the academic expectations of the university environment, because they arguably are more intense than the high school environment. And if not more intense, definitely different in some ways. And then the, the expectations of being a responsible student and community member as a whole. I think those are really important.
And Caitlin, I'll ask you this question. How do you think students can best prepare for those academics at the college level?
Yeah, so I think it's never too early to start preparing for those. But definitely by like junior, senior year, the student should be sort of paying more attention to how they're studying, how they're approaching their learning, developing good study habits, early in high school that will help them in college too. If their high schools offer any type of resource for that, like developing academic strategies or, developing study skills, the students should definitely utilize those, seek those out to utilize those. And sort of what Jenna mentioned, like they should start paying more attention to, and focus on the supports that they are using, because some of those may be different at the college level. You know, while they are still able to receive accommodations at the college level, they should also understand that the expectations and of the courses and the assignments are going to be the same for all students. And so while in high school, they may have been able to submit a shorter paper or have fewer multiple choice questions or multiple choice answers in a question, at the college level, those expectations are the same for all students across the board. So that's something that they should pay attention to as well, junior, senior year, to start thinking about how that will go in the future. And then, like Jenna mentioned too, they definitely should be comfortable and knowledgeable about their disability and how it is affecting their learning. One way to do this is to either lead or at least be involved in their IEP or 504 meetings, so that they are part of the process and they begin to develop those self-advocacy skills and, you know, those skills that are going to help them in the future when they come to college and they are the adult and they're advocating for themselves, which may be different than the high school. So yeah, it's definitely necessary to start thinking about in high school. There are various resources to do so. So I think it's good for students to start thinking about.
Can I add something to that aspect? It just reminded me that there are some accommodation, the names of the accommodations that we use might be the same names for some modifications students had in high school, like a scribe. And something like a scribe is understood to be a note taker, or someone who helps a student with an exam during, or like a reader during an exam. At the college level, a scribe is normally somebody who simply writes down the exact words said by a student during a test, or maybe it's an in-class assessment. So what's really important to start doing when a student is in high school is to answer the questions themselves, not ask questions of the reader or the scribe. At the college level, that would be considered plagiarism, cheating, to get questions answered by somebody in an exam room or during an exam, unless it's the professor. So the professor might actually, I'm so sorry about my video's freezing. The professor might answer questions during a test. And I think most exam rooms or exam situations have something set up so that students can get those questions asked and answered during the test time. And that should be, you know, requested if that's what the professor does. Some professors don't answer questions during tests. So importance here is that some of the accommodations and modifications are differently perceived and practiced at college. And one of them is the scribe, and you cannot ask questions other than expect someone to answer questions during an exam who's not the professor. It's actually a really big deal.
No, that's great. Are there others like that is a big deal. That's a big difference that a student could be used to one support. Anything else? Like,
I would say with note takers, they're not, most of them are not professional note takers, they're peers. They should be getting paid. We cannot guarantee them until like the second week into the semester. Then the student would get all the back notes from that person. There are other ways to get the information, and what we do is we work with a student to try to figure out what's best in this situation. Do you really need a note taker for English composition when it's mostly discussion based? There might be some direction in it, but could you record that part where the professor is giving you directions and then either write it down or do a speech to text technology to have written down for you? We want students to be as independent as possible. Students are going to go into the workforce. They will need to learn how to be independent, advocate for themselves. So we really work towards that goal of the independence, and also making sure that they're doing as much work as possible. And if they do that, then they're processing the information, they're learning more, they're demonstrating their knowledge. That's the goal when it comes to academics. Are there any more, Jenna, Caitlin, that you can think of that aren't the same?
I think the other thing too is like personal aids or personal assistants. You know, a lot of students come to us that are used to having a one-on-one, if not all day, at least for parts of the day. It's not a thing that we provide. So, you know, understanding while you're still in high school, what that person does for you when they're one-on-one with you, and identifying what you can do, or, you know, is there assistive technology or some other resources that you can use to fulfill that need? Because that's a really harsh reality for a lot of students that are used to that one-on-one support. That's a big one for us.
Yeah, and another one that I just thought of too is in regards to tests and exams. A lot of times in high school, it seems that students might have an accommodation for unlimited time for testing, or they can carry it into the next day or something like that. So while we do offer accommodations for extended time, it's typically either 50% extended time or 100% extended time, but it's rarely, if ever, an unlimited time option. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
I think with all of this description, you sort of covered this, but just that I know Mary has shared this, that sometimes it's a misconception that 504 or IEP travels with them to college, right? And that's that.
Right. So what I'd say about that is, you know, a student that is on an IEP or a 504 in high school is on that specific plan for a reason, right? So the IEP, the laws that govern the IEP are not applicable in the higher education environment. The laws that govern a 504 plan in high school are applicable, but just because they have a 504 plan, it doesn't mean that 504 just transfers with them, right? It's starting from scratch either way. So one thing that happens occasionally is counselors, for example, will work with students to transition them off of an IEP and into a 504 plan in that like final year of high school, thinking that it sets them up for more success. In some ways it could, because the 504 is less about modification and more about accommodation, which philosophically is what the higher ed environment is. But really, aside from that, there's no reason to do it. And it does not just transfer. It's kind of like, you know, starting a cell phone contract with one vendor and then expecting another vendor to meet that contract, right? It's cell phone service, but totally different vendors. It's not going to be the same.
And the other thought with that is that some of the modifications are just not going to be reasonable in higher education. So I think you touched on that, but it doesn't make sense that you would get you know, unlimited time on an exam, because there's no end to that. So it's not reasonable for us to do that. There needs to be a time limit. If, again, it's usually up to 100% extended time. It doesn't mean that is the same for every single person, but it's very rare that someone goes past that amount. And we would still want to have a time limit, because, you know, it needs to end and it needs to be handed in and, you know, judged like every other student. So
now, you all have been so clear about that self-advocacy, and that's going to be so helpful. The more students can do that. But there is a question here, and I know we know this too. So this counselor says, I find that many students who are the neediest who could benefit the most from these services may be the ones who are least likely to utilize them or apply too late. Is there anything that colleges do to reach out to these students?
So I have to jump on the too late thing. There's never a too late, okay? Like, we've done new accommodation meetings days before finals. There's never, ever too late. There should not, from a legal perspective, there should not be a fine cutoff for when accommodations have to be requested by, you know, for classroom accommodations. So like, keep that in mind. I know, you know, schools do outreach. We try to make sure that we are at every recruitment and welcome event that we have. We go into their res halls to make sure that we're meeting people. We try to, you know, offer different types of opportunities to at least get to know us. Because one of the big things is destigmatizing these services. You know, I think that you've got to acknowledge that there's that to contest with. And then, you know, we have a variety of systems in place at Bridgewater where faculty can kind of subtly refer a student to our office. Academic advisors do this, you know, so there's different initiatives across the campus to make sure that students are connecting with the resources they need, and that does include student accessibility services. But you're absolutely right. If, you know, if the student resists all forms of outreach, and they don't follow through and they don't want accommodations, there is definitely a very solid, huge, overwhelming brick wall there. So having those conversations now when the student's in high school, you know, getting over the mindset of, I know I was on an IEP, but I'm gonna give it a go without anything, right? That clean slate. We hear it all the time. And that's great that they are super motivated and excited to take that on. It's better, I would argue, if they have the accommodations squared away and then just don't wind up needing them. So those conversations that can happen now in high school to sort of lay the groundwork for those outreach interventions once they get to college are great.
Sarah, you might be on mute.
I was on mute. And I'm like laying back. But we just had one of those students come to us yesterday. He was a junior, needed accommodations. He was on a IEP beforehand and was finally like, I think I just need it. And I said, I'm glad you came in. Can you repeat the original question? Because there was something there.
Yeah, just about, you know, that sometimes, of course, the students who are most likely to need these services, you know, aren't the ones who are self-advocating, and what our college is doing to try to reach them. And it sounds like a lot. I mean, it sounds like
yes. So there is a lot, and again, educating them at the high school level, that they are in charge. And I try to inspire them. You are in charge now of your life. You are taking this on. You asked us if we would take you as a student, and we said yes. So, you know, we're making that commitment to you. We're hoping you're making that commitment to us. You know, inspiration in that way, reminding them of their responsibility. It cannot be blamed on the disability. If it is blamed on the disability, then maybe they're not otherwise qualified, because they need to step up and they need to make sure that they go to their services, they go to class, that they do the work. And we have plenty of students, especially with COVID now, and I think the lack of accountability or less accountability for their performance in high school, and in some colleges too. You know, students need to be held accountable now as high school students for their performance. So that is one thing that I do ask of, you know, guidance and high school and college counselors and special education staff, is to make sure that students are being held accountable for their work now, because we want them to be qualified.
And another thing,
oh, sorry, Caitlin, yeah.
No, that's okay. I was just going to add that sometimes it seems like students are hesitant to come to the office or to speak with anybody in disability services because they're concerned with sharing that information or having that information, the disability related information, be out there, you know, when they're at their new college and things like that. So just something for them to keep in mind is, I know in high school, a lot of times teachers, administrators will see the IEP, they see the diagnosis, they see the disability related information or testing information. At the college level or here at Westfield, when we share accommodations with professors, we only share those accommodations. They only see the accommodations that the student is approved for. They don't see any disability related information. That stays in our office, confidential. If the student wants us to share it, we can, but you know, regularly we would just keep that here in our office. So if that's the reason why a student is hesitant in coming forward, it might just help them to know that we keep that here and anything we talk about is confidential.
Good point.
We have this quick specific question, so maybe one of you can just answer this because I don't really understand it. For students with 504s who have been DX'd, you must know what that is, okay, by a therapist, what testing do you require for accommodations?
So at Bridgewater, it's pretty straightforward. We would accept like a letter from that practitioner that diagnosed the student on their letterhead with their licensure information on it. It would need to include the specific diagnosis. It doesn't have to have the DSM code, but most of the time it does. And then information that's relevant to the barriers that the student is facing because of that. You know, so a little additional context, because like anxiety disorder as a diagnosis, that can present really differently in every person that has it, right? And then if there's relevant treatment information, it's great to know that as well. Not necessarily required, but definitely encouraged if it's something that may impact them and their learning.
So if there's a medication that does something to them, which it could be an ADHD med that cuts off at 3 o'clock, or it could be something that also makes them present in a different way that will affect their ability to perform in class or to learn. It makes them tired. After 6 o'clock, they can't study anymore. Those sorts of things are helpful to know because then we can look at other ways of accommodating them, like maybe making a reduced course load if they can't study all day long like students are supposed to. There are also some providers who are very guarded with the information that they give to us. So we have come across some providers who are usually the providers of students who don't have money, students who are just on Mass Health, and they will not share either, they won't share symptoms. You as a client, or the student as a client of that provider, needs to push to say, I need to have this information sent to disability services so that they can determine whether there is a disability. Your role as a therapist is to determine, is there a condition? And how does this condition manifest? And what are the symptoms and how severe is it? So that we on our end can determine whether this condition substantially affects a major life activity. And so it's important for schools to work with these practitioners and for the families to work with these practitioners to encourage them to share more information. And in the college realm, I'm not sure if anybody has come across that issue with some providers, usually group providers that take Mass Health.
Mary, and what else? I know, Mary, you talked with a lot of people, you get a lot of questions.
I guess one thing I was thinking about, and I missed for both of your programs, for students that access the services, is there a point person that kind of keeps them on track weekly if they somehow start to not follow through or not check in, or I was curious about that.
So I'll go first, if you don't mind, Sarah, because our programs are actually really different in this respect. I wish that my office had that. We don't, being really honest. So if a student reaches out to us, we will gladly chat with them, meet with them, you know, anytime. But we don't have that ongoing follow-up because of the number of students we support and the size of our office. What we do have, though, would be like academic coaching that I mentioned before that works with students on executive functioning. If they are meeting with an academic coach, that's generally a weekly commitment, and that's some added level of kind of accountability and a point person to help them sort of manage their community experience. But I would say that's for us in our traditional program, like that's pretty much the closest that we come to that.
And academic coach meaning someone external, right, from the university, or
nope,
someone...
they're within the university, part of the Academic Achievement Center. And like Sarah said about, you know, the other resources at Bonacos, the academic coaches at the AAC at BSU are all, you know, kind of included in the cost of admission. So any undergraduate student is welcome to use them regardless of their status with our office. So we do a lot of referrals to academic coaching for specifically that reason.
Mm-hmm.
So there are the traditional accessibility disability services support programs do not provide that extra one-on-one attention on a weekly basis. There are some programs at other schools that do that. So at Dean College, at LaSalle College, at Curry College, at Mitchell College, and these are like the surrounding colleges, they have specific programs for students who have a learning disability or ADHD, and some also include autism in those programs. We have our learning disabilities program. We enroll about 110 students each year into this program, which is only a fraction of the number of students that we get for applications. And in this program, we provide that additional one-on-one regular support. And we do reach out to our students. So we'll reach out to them. And I think that, Jenna, do you use Starfish also?
No, we don't. We use a different program.
Okay, so a lot of schools, I think almost all, if not all of the sister universities have some sort of report system for professors to tell students' advisors and to tell the students that they're doing well, or maybe they're missing some exams or they're missing some homework. So that is something that would be sent to us as advisors. It's normally sent to coaches, to their faculty advisors, to whomever they have a contact with. So most schools will have something like that. So you should ask about that at the schools your students are interested in. We use that as well. We get reports from professors in our learning disabilities program for our learning disability program students, and we'll reach out to students if we get positive or negative feedback from the professor. We reach out to them regularly to remind them to come in for early course registration, We remind them that if you're going to change your accommodations, it's time to do that now. And we're just regularly reaching out to students to see how they're doing. Most of our students meet with us regularly every week or every other week. As they turn into juniors and seniors, that might become less frequent. They're meeting with their major advisors, which is absolutely fine. Because our program is an elective program, students are not forced to do anything unless they want their accommodations or their early course registration, then they must come meet with us. But there are other resources on campus. So this is why it's so important for a student to identify the major that they're interested in, or the type of school that they're interested in, or maybe it's the activities there, and then research the school. Research disability services and other supports like that, but also research to see if there are any other programs. Because at Westfield, we have a program called Urban Education. It's a bit of a misnomer. However, it's for first-generation college students, students who are low income, and it's for them to have an advisor and also a bridge opportunity during the summer to take some classes so that they can get acclimated to college life beforehand and have some classes under their belt when they get to college as a little buffer just in case. So we have our urban education program. It's an admissions-based program. We also have, and a lot of schools have, a program like this, TRIO Student Support Services. It's a federally grant-supported program. It works with students who have either and or a documented disability, they're low income, and their determination of whether someone is low income is whether they're getting federal student aid. It's pretty low bar, basically. And first generation college student, which means the student's parents did not finish a 4-year degree. Okay, so look for programs that will support students. TRIO Student Support Services works individually with students. They can come in and meet them. They do reach out to students. They have professional tutors. They also work on financial literacy. That's financial literacy, which a lot of students need. No, do not sign that credit card and call it in and activate it. No. So anyways, there's lots of supports. And just looking around at the culture and, visiting the campus, asking students, how are you supported on campus? It is, one of the best things to do. Or having somebody Zoom in. Just get connected.
Yeah, I think that's the message, right? You have to really dig down and you have to know yourself and find the resources that are going to help you, as simple as that, right? And kind of dig around on campus, like you just mentioned. That's a great thought. Like, there are these other programs that exist that may help somebody.
Regardless of disability. Again, the thing is to have a point person on campus. If that happens to be a faculty advisor, that's fabulous. If you happen to, really dig your, environmental science professor, and you visit them at office hours periodically, great. That can be that person. Make sure you get their agreement on that too, though. Yeah. Boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to thank you all so much. This was terrific. Lots of good information, and thank you, all of you here with us, for asking questions and for staying engaged. And we will send you the slides and the recording. And hopefully, I can say this, we will continue to do presentations like this. And so continue to look to the MEFA Institute for all kinds of webinars like this to help you in your jobs. And thank you, Jenna, Caitlin, Sarah, Mary.
Thank you for asking us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. This was great. Take care.